Tonight on Reel to Reel, if you or anyone you know has a chemical or alcohol abuse addiction, you won't want to miss our feature story, 12 Steps to Recovery. Joe O'Neill takes us to the Florida Everglades with his vintage video review, Cross Creek. And we'll be introduced to some brave seniors who feel you're never too young to learn. These stories and more in this week's edition of Reel to Reel. Hello, I'm Monsignor Charles Minor.
And I'm Pat Shelton. Welcome to Reel to Reel. You know, I'm so happy you tuned in tonight because we have a very good program for you. For example, if you know someone who is on drugs or alcohol and needs help, I'll introduce you to someone who explains how families can help those dependent on chemical addictions.
That always takes a lot of introspection first, though, Pat. But the introspection is a good idea. Joe O'Neill shows us on Vintage Video how to pick a film about introspection, which is a very tough thing to do, especially in the area you just talked about, the idea of addiction to drugs and alcohol. It's a very tough one because all of us think it belongs to somebody else. But you know, it's no one group. There are no restricted areas when you start looking for signs and symptoms.
15% of the population of the United States suffers from the disease of alcoholism. Statistically, each alcoholic affects 5 significant other people. That means 75% of the population of this country is directly involved in the disease of addiction. Many of us have seen the startling PSAs on local and national TV.
Lying is a vicious circle and there's no way out except to tell the truth. It's not so easy this time, Maureen. If I tell you, it's just gonna make you mad.
1 out of every 5 people who try cocaine get hooked. But that's not your problem. Or is it?
Extensive research is being done on the chemical imbalance that occurs in the brain during the consumption of drugs and alcohol. Exciting changes are occurring in the field of chemical dependency treatment. Many more people are being treated than previously, and treatment is beginning at earlier stages in the disease. Family members are realizing the need for involvement both in the recovery of the chemically dependent and in their own recovery. During this time, patients are provided with basic education concerning the disease. They're introduced to participate in 12-step programs and are helped to explore the impact of the disease upon their lives. Recently, Reel to Reel visited the Karen Counseling Services in Philadelphia, an intensive outpatient program facility, to talk to the clinical coordinator and therapist involved in counseling recovering people and their families.
We have several different programs here. We have a family education series that lasts for 6 weeks. People can start it at any time. That's the first step. It introduces the problem. We also have codependency groups, and we have groups for adult children of alcoholics. They're experiential psychotherapy groups, and people come into them for a minimum of 6 months.
Coming from a medical point of view, alcoholism and addiction has the same symptoms, has signs and symptoms just as other diseases do, you know, cancer or diabetes or tuberculosis or any. And the signs and symptoms of alcoholism are that it is a progressive disease. It keeps on going and it keeps getting worse continuously in your life. You can get it into remission if you stop using the chemicals and join a 12-step program of recovery and maintain this program of recovery. Then that disease can be in remission, just like leukemia or cancer, you know, or other diseases can be in remission or under control.
An addiction is usually medical, psychological, and spiritual. It is a threefold disease, and therefore it has to be treated as a threefold disease. The 12 Steps program, which is synonymous not only with AA, with Narcotics Anonymous, with Cocaine Anonymous, with Smokers Anonymous, with Gamblers Anonymous, all of which are classified as addictions, forms of way of life to recovery.
After therapy, the recovering person has options as to where he will live. He could go home. Some are not that fortunate, and they might need lodging. The Living Free Center in Kensington, Philadelphia, offers homes called recovery houses. Paul Fahrenkampf talked to Reel about the importance of transitional living quarters for the recovering person.
As your sobriety goes on, as your clean time goes on, other issues will come up in your life, you know. But the main thing is to learn how to live a day at a time and fill in all those empty gaps that were once, at one time, part of your life with buying your drugs, going to bars, dealing with active addicts, active alcoholics. Your whole life was centered around that. Now, once that is taken out of your life, there's all these gaps saying, now what am I going to do with my life?
Meetings are essential to recovery. The addict needs the support of fellow addicts. The Narcotics Anonymous Alcoholic Anonymous group is any meeting of 2 or more recovering addicts or alcoholics who meet regularly at a specific time and place for the purpose of recovery from the disease of addiction. All NAAA groups are bound by the principles of the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions. Each group has but one primary purpose: to carry the message of recovery to the addict who still suffers. One responsibility of the group is to provide an atmosphere of recovery for the newcomer as well as existing members. Any addict can stop using, lose a desire to use, and find a new and better way to live. In meetings, we hear other addicts share their strength, hopes, and experiences in order to stay clean themselves and help others to do the same. They have found that the therapeutic value of one addict or alcoholic helping another is without parallel. Although politics make strange bedfellows, as the old saying goes, addiction makes users one of a kind. Their personal stories may vary in individual pattern, but in the end they all have the same thing in common. They know all too well the 2 things that make up true addiction: obsession and compulsion.
Hi, my name is Demetrius, and I'm a grateful recovering addict. My life was totally unmanageable before I got on drugs and alcohol. I wound up being homeless and things. I could not keep a job. None of my family members wanted anything to do with me. And I finally sought help through rehab, where I learned to get some spiritual principles in my life, and I learned how to live without using drugs.
My name's John. I'm a grateful recovering addict. For me, drugs and alcohol took me on an emotional roller coaster ride. Luckily enough, I had a place to turn, Living Free. I had a friend of mine who's a counselor at Living Free who gave me some hope. And today, I respect myself, and in the same, I'm also able to help other recovering addicts.
Most addicted individuals realize in their addiction they were slowly committing suicide, but addiction is such a cunning enemy of life that they had lost the power to do anything about it. The timeless truths of our faith must be applied at each moment in history and in every place to current realities. As Christians, we are called to discern the suffering and vulnerabilities of each other and to respond as Jesus would. If you or a family member has a problem with drugs, gambling, or alcohol, seek help.
May look a bit unfamiliar to some of you, but it's not. 75% of us are actively involved in the problem.
Now, Monsignor, to something a little more cheerful. I'm not really familiar with Joe O'Neill's pick this week, his film selection, but I noticed in the film clip in the background an award-winning actress, Alfie Woodard, and she's playing a supporting role, and that's very interesting to me. Watch with us as Joe O'Neill reviews Cross Creek, this week's vintage video.
Close your eyes and reminisce about all the people who have gone in and out of your life. Imagine the stories you could tell, tales featuring your insights into human nature and your reactions to them. Sometimes you say to yourself, if only I could write down all that I've experienced. Author Marjorie Rawlings, writer of the classic The Yearling, did just that. She moved alone to the backwoods of Florida. A change in location, time, and a lot of inward reflection took place before she realized her life's work. Introspective personal writing didn't come easy. Eventually, Marjorie Rawlings' insights into the human condition brought true-life drama to her readers. A wonderful video starring Mary Steenburgen called Cross Creek brings Rawlings' story into your home. Here's a scene from Cross Creek. Marjorie Rawlings is a strong-headed woman, and a visitor drops into her Florida solitude, and she's not happy.
Morning. Rollins is busy working.
Morning. Like to go for a little spin?
I have work to do.
Well, I thought you'd like to try her out.
Mr. Baskin, I don't really have time for games.
Well, I figured that you might be needing a car. It is a long walk into town, so I brought one out for you to try out.
I can't afford a car.
You can afford this one, Miss Rollins. Put your shoes on, I'll show it to you. Because it's not what you'd call a formal car. So if you'd like to come as you are, that'd be fine.
It's all right if I clean up now. Yes? Thank you.
And if you want to put on a summer dress and pack a nice picnic lunch, that'd be fine, too. You don't want to turn it down before you look it over.
Mr. Baskin,
Norton.
I appreciate your concern, but I can't possibly afford a car, so if you'll just excuse me.
No, ma'am, I certainly do not excuse you. Now, I've considered that you're new here and that you're nervous about starting out. But you're being pig-headed. I didn't come to sell you a car. I put two and two together, and as far as I can tell, you don't have anybody to depend on.
I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself.
I don't care how perfectly capable you may think you are. The fact is that you don't have a means of transportation. Now, maybe I'm out of line, but I took it upon myself to fetch that old jalopy of yours.
It doesn't run.
It does now.
Oh. So how much do I owe you?
I brought it out to you as a gift. If that offends you, I'm sorry. But I sure as hell didn't come here to take nothing from you.
In Cross Creek, you'll enjoy well-drawn characters with good values interacting in the face of rural hardship. Rent it. It's available on Thorn EMI Video. This is Vintage Video. I'm Joe O'Neill.
Joe O'Neill teaches us how to choose well. We hope you choose well and stay with us. We'll be right back.
Is everyone about ready? We're gonna be late for church.
John, I hope you're putting on your good shoes.
Everyone looks so nice.
We seldom realize what we have until it's gone. Religious freedom. A message from your Catholic neighbors.
Why don't you take this gentleman next?
Lady, you just made my day.
Go ahead. Make someone's day. With love.
Earlier in tonight's program, we watched a report on drug and alcohol abuse recovery. And as I recall, almost everyone in the film was very young, but alcohol and drug abuse affects entire families, both young and old. And we're going to talk about the impact of chemical dependency on families with tonight's guest, Patricia Brady Campbell. Welcome, Pat.
Thank you, Pat.
Now, Patricia, you are a registered nurse.
That's correct.
And you are an addictions counselor with a certain program. Won't you tell us about it?
Well, I work for the Caron Foundation with Caron Counseling Services in Philadelphia.
Is that Caron with a...
With a C.
With a C?
C-A-R-O-N.
Caron Counseling Center, yes.
And we have an intensive outpatient program for chemically dependent people. And what I do is I will evaluate anyone who's concerned about their own use of chemicals, including alcohol. And also I will talk with family members who are concerned about another member of the family that they think may have a problem with drugs or alcohol. And I will help to give them some direction in seeking help for, themselves or the family member.
Now, do you meet mostly individuals, or is it a family-oriented counseling service that you render?
I meet mostly with individuals, but we have a portion of our program that's directed to families. It's a 3.5-hour session each Wednesday evening. It runs consecutively for 6 weeks. And anyone who comes to our program, or most people who come to our program for treatment, we encourage them to come on this Wednesday evening with their significant family members. And this way we educate and try to begin treatment for the whole family. And the portions that we cover are, we talk about the disease of addiction itself. We talk about feelings and learning to express feelings within the family. We talk about relationships and what happens to relationships because of addiction, and how we can help relationships recover. And then we spend time talking about recovery, early recovery and later recovery. So each person, each patient that's willing, we encourage to bring their whole family, even younger children.
And it really is important that the family work as a unit to help the individual who is the addicted person. You need that support, and you teach families how to support the victims.
We, in our program, urge our patients, and it's one of the requirements of our program, to go into 12-step recovery. They do that on their own, but it's part of one of the requirements that they agree to when they sign our treatment contract. So we would urge the individual to go to AA meetings or NA meetings or CA meetings, which would be Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, or Cocaine Anonymous. And then the family members, we would urge them and try to stress the importance of them starting to go to the 12-step program of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Pat, could you share with us a few of the 12 steps to recovery?
Yes. The first step is we admitted that we were powerless over alcohol or drugs and that our lives had become unmanageable. And then the second step is came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And the third step is made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him.
Thank you. Very good. Pat, what happens to an individual if their families don't become involved? I imagine it's much harder to recover.
Well, we teach our individual patients who are chemically dependent that it's their responsibility to recover. It's not their family's responsibility to get them well or to be responsible for them. One of the things we stress in recovery is self-responsibility. And we teach our patients that it seems like in a selfish way, but it's really not. It's in a self-caring way that they must put their sobriety first. And that means that they've got to set up a program with our help, and in the beginning it might include a daily AA or NA meeting. And lots of times families get upset about that. But we teach our patients that that's how they're going to have themselves to give to their families, is if they're sober and if they maintain this sobriety program. And then if we are fortunate enough to get a family member or members in treatment, and the Al-Anon 12-step program is based on the same 12 steps as AA. So if we're fortunate enough to get the families in and they begin to understand the 12-step recovery program, then they aren't so fearful, they aren't quite so protective, and we also teach them to focus on their own recovery, because we feel that each member of the family has been affected in maybe a process of diseases going on in their lives in a very subtle way. So if they're focusing on their own recovery and what they need to change in order to establish a recovering family, then that takes their focus off the chemically dependent person, and it helps them understand, that they have a responsibility to themselves, not to oversee the other person with the chemical addiction, but to look at themselves.
Now, Pat, I'd like you to give a telephone number for anybody who thinks they have a problem in their family, who is looking for help, who can, and you told me you speak with them individually and give them good advice and direction. Where should they call to get in touch with you?
They can call Karen Counseling Services, 879-8800.
Thank you so much for being with us, Pat Brady Campbell. And now, won't you stay with us for a few messages in the public interest?
I haven't seen this in years.
Grandma, who's that? Is that great-grandpa and grandma?
Yes, it is. And that's Ellis Island. Your great-grandparents worked very hard to get there.
Why'd they come here?
Well, like many immigrants, they wanted to fulfill their beliefs and dreams.
About God?
About many things, especially God.
Religious freedom. A message from your Catholic neighbors.
I want you to listen to me. I want you to cross at the corner and look both ways when you're running out there in the street. Because people today, they drive crazy and they will run right over you. And I don't want anything to happen to you because Daddy and I love you very much.
Today, the streets are even more dangerous than you think.
You like flying? I got something that'll really make you fly.
So talk to your kids about drugs, or somebody else will.
We welcome your comments, suggestions, and donations and encourage you to write us at Real to Real, St. Charles Seminary, 1000 East Wynwood Road, Overbrook, PA 19096, or call us during regular business hours at 668-9842.
In my seminary assignment, we deal very much with prayer, and believe me, there's nothing magical about prayer. Watch these next two segments and try to realize that in all the prayer that we do, we always pray usually for what we want from God. But as you pray for what you want from God, you got to think too, do you really want what God does?
Herb Score arrived in the major leagues in 1955 and quickly established himself as baseball's premier left-handed pitcher. He won 36 games and notched 508 strikeouts in his first 2 seasons. And like Bob Feller, Cleveland's pitching ace of a generation before, Herb Score seemed destined for baseball immortality and a place in the Hall of Fame. But this dream ended the night a line drive rocketed off the bat of Yankee slugger Gil McDougall. And in an instant, Herb Score lay writhing in pain on the pitcher's mound. The wicked smash had hit the Cleveland pitcher squarely in the face. "My eye," his thoughts screamed out. His head was echoing with the thud of the ball's impact, and he tasted the warm blood trickling down his throat. Herb silently prayed, "St. Jude, stay with me." Herb's teammates clustered around him at the pitcher's mound in Municipal Stadium. He could make out the voice of his roomie, Rocky Colavito. In the blur, he also heard the voice of his buddy, Mike the Bear Garcia. But fears flooded his thoughts. Have I lost my eye? Nancy and I are getting married this fall, and I've lost my eye. Then thoughts about the game entered his mind. Did anybody throw out McDougall? Who's going to relieve me? Herbert felt tighter than usual that night. Perhaps that's why he didn't duck in time to avoid McDougall's line drive. As he was lifted onto the stretcher, Herb asked the trainer, "Have I still got my eye?" "The blow shut your eye pretty tight," the team physician told Herb in the clubhouse. And later at the hospital, he was encouraged when he was able to perceive a slight haze of light through his injured eye. Herb listened to the end of the game from his hospital bed. Colavito drew a walk with the bases loaded in the 9th. Cleveland 2, Yankees 1. A costly victory indeed. And as Herb lay in his hospital bed, he wondered if he would ever pitch again. And he prayed to St. Jude, the patron of hopeless and desperate cases. The saint had answered his prayers several times before. When Herb was only 3 years old, a bakery truck ran over him, crushing both his legs. It was feared that he would require surgery to implant steel plates in his legs because his bones weren't healing. A priest brought a relic of St. Jude to the child's bedside and prayed with the family. Miraculously, Herb's bones began to knit together and heal. Herb's prayers were also answered when he was afflicted with rheumatic fever at age 10, and again in the minor leagues after a severe shoulder injury threatened his career. Now Herb's prayers and thoughts gave him the serenity to know that whatever God had planned for him, even if it meant never pitching again, he was safe in his hands. During his convalescence, Herb received over 10,000 letters from well-wishers. He was given so many crucifixes, rosaries, and scapulars, he said he could have opened a religious goods store. A week after the accident, Herb received the good news that his eyesight would nearly return to normal. Although he never regained his brilliant form, the brilliant form of those first 2 years, Herbert Jude Score, with the help of his patron saint, battled back to the major leagues. And 2 years after the accident, he took the mound against the New York Yankees and struck out 13 batters.
If I were to say that sometimes I worry about you, would you tell me that it's just none of my business? Well,
You're probably right, but I do anyway. And I often think about things that you could do, especially if you live alone. One of them is going back to school.
This is Emeritus College. Emeritus is Latin for retired with honor. These classrooms are cheap to build and maintain, but they are rich temples of discovery for people like Rita, who studies Spanish, literature, and more practical subjects.
In home repair, I learned how to fix windows, faucets, toilet when it's running.
And now you can do those things?
I can do those things.
And then you took car repair also?
I can repair, I can change my tires, the oil, the air drum.
Dean Maggie Hall says that seniors created this college themselves in 1974.
The retired teachers got together from the Retired Teachers Association, and they helped us formulate what it was that would work.
Grace was an elementary school teacher for 30 years. Now at age 85, Grace is a full-fledged botanist with 2 published books to her credit. And it all started with a plant she wanted to identify.
I found a flower, a beautiful yellow flower, and it had 5 petals, and it had many stamens. And all of the various attributes of this flower, I looked in that book. And I was able to say, yes, 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 yes.
Dean Hall says that no big budget is needed. The smallest of towns can start a college for seniors.
All they need is a place. All they need is somebody to agree that they can have a room. And if they have someone who has an expertise, get them to teach.
Thank you very much, Pat, for getting us into the 12-step program.
Yeah.
It's a very important factor for all fields now.
Yes, they use it in many different kinds of recovery programs.
I know in spirituality programs, it's considered to be one of the best steps. Almost anybody, one step at a time. Have you known many people to take the program?
Yeah, I do. I know one lady I used to work with who's a recovering alcoholic, and she's recovered through their 12-step program, and she has a wonderful position with a major hospital in Philadelphia.
I know a few friends of mine have been involved in it, and they found it very, very successful. And it's very successful in trying to get people to develop a prayer program, a spirituality program, because it puts things directly in order, who you are, what you are, and your relationship to others.
And it puts a piece in place for that missing piece of addiction. You need that to hold on to.
It's a tough thing. Addiction must be hard. I guess we're all addicted to something or other. I don't know what mine would be. I never sat down to think what my addictions might be. Goofy ideas or crazy humor or what, but it's an addiction. But whatever yours is or mine is, it's important that we recognize we have certain things we have to examine and study. So why don't you examine your prayer life, your spirituality, what steps are you taking to make it better? Goodbye and God bless you.
Good night, everybody.
Travel arrangements for Reel to Reel by Atkinson and Mullen, Newtown Square, PA, 215-359-5980.
Praise the Lord. I'm Father Ralph Chifo from the Charismatic Office. Jesus assures us, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And each week at a Charismatic prayer group, we experience through sharing, singing, and learning the joy of knowing the Lord with us. Become one of us and all of our brothers and sisters in prayer and the joy of learning about Christ's death and resurrection. Contact us at 668-HOPE.